Welcome to the podcast that brings you interviews, reviews, arts and entertainment news, all wrapped up in one place. You're listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo. Coming up in this episode, actress Georgia Locke joins me to chat about working with Liz Hurley's son Damien. Shh, it's strictly confidential.
I think you could pause this film anywhere and it would be a sort of beautiful freeze frame that you could paint, and hang up somewhere. And you feel more comfortable because you think, okay, they've got a clear vision here. And from debut feature films to documentaries about democracy and freedom of speech with filmmaker Kym Staton.
Since 2010, Assange has been held in progressively narrower, darker, colder, and crueler spaces.
He has been detained since the 7th of December 2010 in one form or another.
Kym will be giving us the lowdown on his documentary, The Trustful Julian Assange. I'll also be chatting with the rather charming singer-songwriter and record label owner Rachael Sage, who's just been supporting Lulu on tour.
Let me just say, if I have 10% of her energy at 75 years old, I will be so happy because she's incredible.
Plus, to play us out of the pod, a nifty little tune from my nephew Luca in a feature we call NEPH JAM. NEPH JAM. Get it? Pats oneself on the back for a little bit of play on words. So, without further ado, let's hop, skip and a jump to films first. Liz Hurley's son, Damien, has ventured into feature films with his debut, Strictly Confidential, a drama tinged with the psychological thriller edge about a young woman who dies in an accident.
Rebecca?
Or has she?
Rebecca!
And then on the 1-year anniversary of her death, her nearest and dearest come together to remember her. But of course, all is not as it seems. I caught up with the leading lady, Georgia Locke, to find out more.
That day started so normally. Just another day in paradise.
Rebecca? Rebecca!
It's been a year, sweetheart, without my Rebecca.
She was my best friend. She killed herself. We came out here to reconnect and remember.
It's actually the first time we've all been together since...
Strange being here without her.
Can't grieve forever.
Through... Rebecca.
It's good to meet you, Georgia. I've got my red lippy on. I thought I'm kind of maybe embracing a little bit of Liz Hurley, if I'm honest,
As we all should.
But look, we're not here to talk about just Liz. We're here to talk about you and the film, Strictly Confidential. Let's talk about your character first of all, Mia. Obviously, we don't want to do any spoilers, but tell us a little bit about Mia, what's she like, what's she about, and then how does she fit into the story? Because she's kind of the linchpin, isn't she, throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, I think she, to be honest, at the time of where the film is, she probably doesn't quite know who she is herself in that moment because she's so consumed by her quest, as it were. She's a bit of a haunted young woman, really, who is just really struggling with grief and loss and an unsettled feeling that something just isn't quite adding up, and is desperately searching for answers.
Yes, desperately searching for answers and grieving, and the grief is also a big part of the story as well, and everyone of course grieves in their own way, which we see through the different characters in the narrative as well. And I mean, in terms of working with Damien Hurley, it's his first feature film as well. He's written and directed it. And of course, he's got his mum in the film as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what's it like working with a first-time feature film director? Because obviously you've been working since you were quite young in the industry.
It was really interesting, actually, because I have to say, looking back at the experience, but even during, you wouldn't know that was Damien's first time directing a feature. In my opinion, I think. And different directors have different styles. You know, I've worked with a lot of directors that are kind of more focused on directing the camera, perhaps, and then there are some directors that you feel like they are more directive of the actors. And I don't know, everyone works in their own way, but I think that what I love about his style is that you can see he's really thought about the overall kind of aesthetic and look of each scene and each shot. You know, I think you could pause this film anywhere and it would be a sort of beautiful freeze frame that you could paint, you know, and hang up somewhere. And you feel more comfortable because you think, okay, they've got a clear vision here. Perhaps I am slightly biased because I met Damien on this and he's now one of my closest friends. But that aside, I think he's got real skill and real artistry in his direction.
Some really beautiful shots in this film, and also the location is quite amazing. Where did you shoot this film? I was like, I want to go there.
Honestly, it was a bit of a pinch myself location. We were in Nevis, so just off St Kitts, and it was absolutely, I mean, yeah, leaving my room every morning, you know, to go and film. You sort of got the sea on one side, got the volcano on the other. You just sort of think, I'm just trying to walk to breakfast, and I feel really sort of like humbled, and I don't know, just quite overwhelming with just in awe of what an idyllic place.
Just stunning. It's a bit of a character in a way in the film. It's beautiful, it's idyllic, and yet there's all this chaos and sort of people being pulled from here to there and tested and all of those kind of things. That's the characters, and that's going on in the forefront, as it were.
Yeah, it's like a character in and of itself. Yeah.
You've got Liz Hurley there. And were there any pressures? Because obviously Liz is Damien's mum. Was she like, Damien, she's also a producer on the film, Damien, darling, no, we're not doing this. We're doing it like that.
Liz is an absolute icon, and Damien's grown up, you know, on sets, really. They're both such pros that I think you can definitely see that they have like some kind of, when they're working together, they do have that connection as you would with a family member in terms of they know what the other one is thinking, kind of what needs to be done. But it didn't feel like there was like a mother-son dynamic on set. You know, it felt like they were business partners that just got on really well, I think is how I would interpret it.
Interesting. Also a little bit of sauciness in Strictly Confidential. My goodness. I mean, it reminded me a little bit, the story, maybe the vibe of the story and some of the themes of revenge.
I did. I loved Revenge. I love that show.
Love that show.
So good.
So good. And then, you know, that sort of extra bit of sauciness. Oh my goodness. Well, we're not going to say what happens, but Damien directing his mum. That's all I'm going to say. Were you there for that scene?
I wasn't on set for that. It was a closed set. That
I was thinking that probably. Yeah, I thought it might be a closed set.
Natasha, I never meant to hurt anyone.
There's something we don't know about Rebecca. I'm sure of it. I'm sorry. For what? Never mind.
If you truly believe something was off, maybe it was.
I know what really happened to your friend.
Rebecca, can I help you?
I lost a friend. She was a patient of yours.
I'm afraid I can't divulge information about other patients with you. She was seeing a therapist under my name.
Acting, the art, the craft and everything. You've been doing this a while, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the Evermore Chronicles, Sadie Sparks as well, which is an animated adventure. So you're providing just your voice for that. Give us a little bit of an indication or a bit of a warts and all. What are the things that you really love? Because I think for every job, there are pros and cons, right? So I just wondered, you know, give us a little bit of a flavour of what Georgia, the actress's life is like.
I'm very blessed with the work that I've had up to this point. And obviously, it is one of those businesses where when you have a job, it's amazing. Like, you know, the gift of being able to imagine what it's like to be someone else and to tell stories, is incredible. And so sort of magical, as it were. But obviously, you get times where things are a bit quieter, and it can be tough in those moments. I really love poetry. I love to write it. I love to read it. And I'm trying to get a lot more involved in that kind of world. I've started going to some open mic nights here in London, and that is something that keeps me sort of feeling slightly afloat in the quieter times.
You know, as a creative person myself, I mean, I've always written poetry as well, especially as a youngster, actually. And now I don't have much time. But then, you know, I do try every now and again. And I love words and that play on words.
I love words.
How you can use them in different ways, especially the English language, because one word can mean several different things. Maybe I'll pop along and find you at one of these.
Oh my gosh, yes, let's go.
Let's go. I'm going to watch. I'm not participating, Georgia.
Oh, no, come on, you've got to do it. You've just said you were a poet. We're getting you on stage.
Oh God, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble. You will. Oh my goodness. Sounds like a lot of fun. I'm going to hunt you down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll be there going woo woo woo. Go Georgia. I mean, look, you know, in those quieter times that you mentioned there as an actress, what do you draw upon? You mentioned poetry there. There's that creative outlet that you need to have. I'm exactly the same. What keeps you happy? How do you lift yourself up? And do you feel that obviously in the times that we're living in now, where there's so much pressure on people in the public eye, on anyone actually, you know, you've got Instagram and all kind of TikTok and everything. How do you deal with that side of things, and what keeps you grounded, Georgia?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's social media can be brilliant for a lot of things, but the pressure side of stuff, especially for women, and also just this whole thing about constantly needing to be monetizing your hobbies as well, and this is constant, like, I think it's sort of warping the idea of success in a lot of ways. I don't know. It can be quite crippling, but I do love it for other reasons. And I think it's obviously a great way to find people that are similar to you. And I have a mental health condition, and it's been an amazing way to connect with people that I wouldn't normally have found. You know, that we all understand each other. So for those things, it's great. But yes, obviously, the sort of constant comparison that can happen on social media is really tough, and I think it's hard. The poetry definitely helps, and also in a way I think I do a lot of voiceover, I think you said earlier, and voiceover, I find when you're doing a cartoon, you have to be very over the top to sell it. Not over the top, but you know, it's just slightly heightened, right? And it's called walla, like the sounds that you do in between if you're looking for something on a shelf, or you need to like hold the door closed because there's a monster coming in or something, right? You have to make those noises. And when you're in the booth, like, it looks fine on screen, but when you're in the booth doing them, you can feel really silly. And I think animation has helped me massively care less about making a fool of myself, because you have to make a fool of yourself in order to sell it and to make it look good. And I think I find animation really freeing in that respect. And I think it's really helped me in life care a bit less. I mean, maybe I'm being a hypocrite because I still obviously care. But yeah,
I know what you mean. It's almost like it's like that whole thing about surrendering and letting go, right?
Yeah.
Final question for you. On Art to Art, we like to do something called the watch list. And the watch list is all about those things. So, you know, we've got a to-do list on our daily or weekly kind of to-do list. Go shopping, get this, buy myself a new dress. That's what I'm doing later today.
Lovely, have fun.
Thanks. So on that to-do list, this is more of an arts and entertainment to-do list. So it's the things that you are vying kind of, you know, in your brain going, oh, I need to watch that series or listen to that podcast or pick up this book or whatever it may be, go to the theatre or an event. So what, Georgia, is on your watch list? You can give me one or two things or however many you want, really.
On my watch list? Well, people keep talking about Baby Reindeer, so I think...
Have you not seen that yet? Oh, gosh. Well, prepare yourself and do not binge it like I did. Baby Reindeer is on your watch list. What else have you got on there?
Well, I'm trying to write a lot at the moment. I don't know if that counts as something that's on my watch list. It's like on my to-do list of things that I'm doing. I'm trying to write a show at the moment, so that's on my list.
Well, listen, all the best with that, Georgia, and thank you very much for having a chat today. And Strictly Confidential equals revenge. Just think about that for a minute. It's almost making me want to go back and watch the series again.
Me too. That was so good. It's been lovely to speak to you.
Really lovely to speak to you. And I'll see you on the poetry circuit.
See you there, man. Can't wait.
The movie Strictly Confidential is available on digital now. And you just heard from lead actress Georgia Locke. She's also a poet, don't you know? I'll catch you for a poetry slam later, Georgia. You're listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo, and I'd love to have an Art to Art with you. Still to come in this episode of Art to Art, my musical guest, Rachael Sage, who supported the likes of Imelda May and Lulu, tells me about her new album, Another Side. But next up, it's time for something a bit more serious as we delve into the mind of documentary director Kym Staton. Julian Assange's name is synonymous with WikiLeaks as the founder of the whistleblowing website with infamous status as the journalist who was holed up in the Ecuador embassy in London and is still facing US extradition for publishing classified military documents from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But the trustful Julian Assange documentary focuses in on the particularly disturbing leaked footage under the title Collateral Murder, where we bear witness to a US airstrike on Iraqi civilians and to Reuters journalists covering the war in 2007. Writer-director Kym Staton puts an emotional case forward for Assange and the injustice of serving time in Belmarsh Prison, a maximum security prison housing notorious criminals. I caught up with Kym at the airport. Yes, I did say the airport, as he was leaving London on his way to Australia and New Zealand. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Since 2010, Assange has been held in progressively narrower, darker, colder, and crueler spaces.
He has been detained since the 7th of December 2010 in one form or another.
And we are now here after years of imprisonment.
WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service.
I think the man is a high-tech terrorist. A high-tech terrorist.
A traitor, a treasonous.
He has to answer for what he has done.
Look, you know, I really feel that where you are in situ right now, where we're doing an interview, it feels rather apt for your documentary, The Trustful. You're not escaping, are you? You're not on the run? Just checking.
Not on the run, no. On tour, travelling around on the way to Auckland for a screening there, and then Sydney, a big Sydney CBD premiere on Tuesday night.
Wow, that's going to be quite the reception, given that Julian Assange is from Australia.
Yeah, we're seeing tremendous response from Australian people with this film. It's showing at over 117 cinemas right now, which is a good sort of 20% of the cinemas. And also New Zealand is really supporting the film and getting into it, and it's definitely interesting to see how different cultures and countries respond to this information.
Give us a little bit of context, Kym. How did you get involved in this project in particular? Why did you want to bring this story to the big screen?
In 2010, I was in the living room watching the news one night, and I saw this shocking video come up on the screen. It was a black and white video of 12 civilians in Baghdad during the Iraq War. It's just standing on a street corner, and two of them were journalists, and they were just having a chat and taking photos. And suddenly it started raining on them, but it wasn't water coming from the sky, it was bullets coming from an Apache helicopter above. An American helicopter was shooting them all dead. And that video stuck in my mind. I didn't know who Julian Assange was or WikiLeaks, and it took some years before I made that connection, but it was WikiLeaks that exposed that shocking video. And about 8 years after seeing that video, I'd had many years of, well, a decade of running documentary events of other people's films and thought about doing a film one day. And finally, I got some time to do it. And so I picked a nice, easy, manageable topic.
Yeah, very easy, very uncomplicated, by the way. It is such a maze of information. It is so almost, I feel like, although this happened back in 2010 and the leak and of this particular footage, because this footage is in your documentary, and watching it again after not having seen it for a long time, it's still so shocking. And it also is scary that even almost 15 years on, like 14 years on, a lot of this material and that leaking of that specific bit of footage feels of the here and now when we look at world events and world news today. It really is a stark reminder of the lack of transparency quite often in the information that we get. Give us an idea of how much was involved before you even decided on the kind of arc of the Trust Fall, your documentary.
Well, I did watch a bunch of documentaries, and then as we started the production stage, I was really, thrown into the deep end, sitting down in front of people like John Pilger and Daniel Ellsberg, the legendary Pentagon Papers Vietnam War whistleblower, and prominent human rights lawyer Jennifer Robinson, and realizing that I just had that one opportunity of 45 minutes or an hour to ask the right questions, and I had to do a massive amount of research. And so I started really plowing into it and reading a lot of books and articles and books that Julian Assange had written. But I also learned a lot through the actual interviews, and as I went, I picked up pretty much, as much as I could of the most important topics. And I probably didn't cover everything that I would have liked to in hindsight, but you only have so much time in a 2-hour film anyway, which is already quite long. And at the end of the day, you do have to sort of chop and choose what you're going to present in the film.
You talked about the contributors there, getting the right people to express all kinds of different views and get different viewpoints on the subject. I know that John Pilger, who you mentioned there, he's a filmmaker as well, isn't he? And there's a quote in there where he says, "Transparency is an extraordinary journalistic achievement." And actually, I feel like in the West, that is such an undervalued statement in a way, because we assume that everything we see and read is absolutely watertight and there is absolute transparency. But when you look at, for example, if we take a look at what's happening in Gaza right now, there are racial, political biases, there are cultural biases, and sometimes we're not getting the full picture. And it terrifies me as a fellow journalist, but also I kind of feel that what Assange did makes it even more incredible because the risks were huge. And of course, he's paying the consequences and has been paying the consequences ever since. Would you say that is necessary for any kind of journalism to be completely transparent? Or do you think that the consequences of being honest, especially it's like the David and Goliath scenario, right? Maybe you can just never win against huge political figures and countries in a way.
Yeah, what WikiLeaks did when they started up in 2006 was to become the first media outlet to take on the mainstream narrative. Nowadays we have these encrypted platforms. So of course there's a lot of misinformation on those platforms, but there's also plenty of truthful information coming out that you're not going to see, very rarely you'll see on the mainstream media. And I think back in 2006 at the time there was nothing like that. And so Assange came up with this innovative encryption that would speed up the flow of truthful information, protect whistleblowers, and it was a brilliant invention, and it worked. And just in 4 short years, they went from unknown to worldwide prominence, teaming up with every major newspaper and putting out these shocking releases.
Assange faces up to 175 years in prison for publishing classified documents exposing U.S. war crimes.
The U.S. government narrative about Julian is a complete fraud. It is a complete fraud from A to Z.
Julian took on the most powerful countries in the world, basically all of them.
We now have confirmed that there were plans to kidnap Julian here in the center of London or even assassinate him.
No one who instigated that illegal and immoral war has been brought to justice. But the great truth teller sits behind bars.
What we need to do in this modern age is learn to unite to protect whistleblowers. We need to be willing to take the time to look at the material that whistleblowers have put out and make sure that they're protected, make sure they don't get prosecuted and persecuted if we're going to have a truthful world and a chance of having a peaceful and just world. And that's why the work of Assange was so important. As you say, we have to realise that mainstream media news is often complete lies and often inaccurate. Our access to the truth is so crucial to a functioning, effective democracy.
Thinking about the fallout of being just the publisher, not the whistleblower, Julian Assange took those risks and knew the risks and fought for his integrity and to keep the integrity of WikiLeaks in terms of just publishing the truth and what was there for all the world to see. I just wondered, in creating and making this documentary and meeting some of the people that you've met along your journey in making the documentary The Trustful, would you say that there has been any fallout or comeback in a negative sense from what you're actually doing?
No, I get asked that question almost every interview, and I did think that there might be some sort of measures or certain sort of challenges that we would encounter. I warned our editors that their computers might get hacked. I thought that there might be some obstacles that the US might do to try to stop the film being made, but nothing happened at all. And actually, everything happened so smoothly, really.
Well, nothing that you know of yet, Kym.
Yeah, well, touch wood,
Touch wood.
What occurred to me recently was probably that when these security intelligence agencies notice that a new documentary is coming out, and of course they're looking at those sorts of things, especially with Assange being such a contentious, controversial sort of situation. Well, then they probably see documentaries as really playing into their narrative and working for them in their goal of warning off future would-be whistleblowers. That the whole idea of persecuting Julian Assange is to be a warning to journalists to not put out the truths of the crimes of the powerful. And what they probably didn't expect is that we would get hold of this never-seen-before footage of an interview of one of the child victims of the collateral murder incident, 10-year-old Sayed Muchachar, which is incredibly harrowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially considering he's no longer with us. He never got to see justice. They didn't consider what the effect of collateral murder video being seen on a big screen for people that have never seen it before. And then all the emotive elements that we put into the film that really touch people's emotions and the way that can encourage people to take action. So this is not your run-of-the-mill standard conventional documentary. It's going to create change. It's going to influence people.
Mr. Assange shows all the symptoms that are typical for a person that has been exposed to psychological torture over a prolonged period of time. He looked at me intensely and said, "I hate to say this." He then hesitated, visibly troubled and searching for words. And then he finally said, "Please, save my life."
Dare I ask, will this be showing in the States?
We're working on that strategy at the moment, and our plan is to build up some good box office results in Australia and New Zealand so that hopefully a big major cinema chain in the US decides to pick it up. And if that happens, we can reach perhaps 1 million people in America overnight or within a week or two after release. And so we can get enormous reach. Rather than going straight to digital, we want to use cinemas because that experience of sitting in a group of people with your full attention with a big screen is the most powerful way to experience a film.
I wondered if Julian has seen it, or even the kind of access that you had, if you had any or were allowed any to Julian, during the process of prepping for the documentary.
Well, up until recently, journalists were not allowed to visit Julian in Belmarsh Prison, which is just another example of injustice and mistreatment. So that wasn't an option. For that reason, we made use of a lot of archive footage, but we were telling the story of what's happened already anyway, so it wasn't necessary to film him. He is aware of the film. His family, Stella's in the film, his father, his brother Gabriel, they're in the film, and so they're very supportive of it and have been very helpful. And in fact, Gabriel's appeared at some of our screenings as on the panel, and with our London preview screening, Stella was on the panel, and that was a huge honour. That's
a real kind of seal of approval, isn't it, in a sense, for the movie. I mean, look, just finally, Kym, I know you've got to get on a plane, and if anyone's, wondering, there's maybe a bit of noise in the background because you're at the airport, but just a really quick kind of question about what would you like to see happen with people watching the film? And I mean, not to put too much of a finer point on it, but opinions might be that, well, this is a real bias kind of documentary. You're only seeing one side of the story. So I just wondered if you could comment on that, but also what would you like people to take away?
I chose not to follow the documentary convention of sort of coming at it a neutral perspective, because very quickly, before I made the film, I realised that this was a clear case of oppression, of abuse, of treading over somebody's human rights and of torture. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, visited Julian Assange in prison with 2 doctors, and under the Istanbul Protocol, they determined that he is a victim of torture. So, there's a great quote that I don't remember the exact words, but it's when we're faced with oppression, if we stand on the fence, we're actually siding with the oppressors. So I couldn't do that ethically or morally. So what I did in the film was I gave 1 minute to his opponents to have their say, and then his supporters get 127 minutes. I thought that was very appropriate, considering that this is just an atrocious case of the abuse of somebody's bodily integrity. The fact that Assange is the most decorated journalist ever, and he's sitting in a maximum security prison in solitary confinement for nearly 5 years, because this is a pivotal moment in history. It will set a shocking precedent if this Australian journalist is sent to America to face these bogus espionage charges. And the film was made with the goal of nothing less than to help Julian Assange get free and to protect free speech for future generations.
Absolutely. I feel that knowledge is power in every sense of the word. It has repercussions for everybody that's involved, and particularly people like journalists who are at the heart of any kind of world event. It's really, really eye-opening. Thank you so much for chatting to me from the airport, and I appreciate the fact that you found a nice quiet spot, Kym, and all the best with the film.
My pleasure, Amanny. Thank you very much for your interest and covering this important issue, and thanks for having me on your show.
If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth.
Julian Assange is a hero.
You've just heard a snippet there from the trustful Julian Assange documentary, and you can look out for it coming to a cinema or perhaps a small screen near you. There are currently some cinemas in the States lined up to show the film in June, and more being arranged as we speak. So if you want to find out where to watch the documentary, you can head on over to thetrustful.org. The thing about the movie and the subject matter is that it asks much bigger questions about democracy and the importance of freedom of speech, and what about journalistic morals and values and holding people to account, which of course have much wider reaching consequences. You're listening to Art with Amanny Mo. We aim to bring you some fabulous conversations with a whole variety of guests from the arts and entertainment world. Feel free to find me on socials at Amanny Mo, that's AMANNYMO, on Instagram or X, formerly known as Twitter. Or if you want to check out all available episodes, all you need to do is go to Art, that's art, the number 2, art.podbean.com. Coming up shortly, I'll be having a musical chat with my final guest, the lovely singer and songwriter Rachael Sage, who's just dropped another album called Another Side. And don't forget, there's another groovy, uplifting NEPH JAM from my rather musical and rather brilliant nephew right at the end of the pod. Fresh off supporting the likes of legendary British singer Lulu in the UK is American singer-songwriter Rachael Sage, who's also toured with Imelda May, Howard Jones and Beth Hart. Rachael also has her own record label and is always on the lookout for new talent. Now, as we're not licensed to play any music, sadly, I know. What I can say is that you can go and search out Rachael's latest album, Another Side. It's absolutely sublime. It's stripped back, lots of folky kind of sounds to it. It's acoustic and it's a reworking of her set of songs and the odd cover too.
Hello.
Hello. How are you, Rachael?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Look, I'm actually...
I see you wearing Frida. I can tell from just the flowers.
There she is.
Oh, I love it.
Now, I'm wearing this because when I watch some of your videos and I see your beautiful... I mean, look at you today, looking gorgeous with the flowers. I'm thinking, Frida.
I'm just in my boring hotel room.
Let's just kick off almost at the very beginning. How did you discover and realise, or even just, did you just end up in the music business? I'm kind of curious as to how you got to where you are today.
Well, to be honest, it just kind of came to me. I mean, I started playing piano when I was 2.5 years old. I actually have a memory, one of my earliest memories, of my legs dangling off the piano bench and sounding out Broadway show tunes by ear with just one hand at that time. I hadn't yet recruited my left hand, and my dad would say things like, "Honey, Billy Joel uses both hands. I think it's time you get the other one involved." You know, so like there was some gentle coaching. But my parents are not musicians, and they just were thoughtful enough to have an instrument in the living room in case one of their daughters took to it. So that was me.
Oh, wow. I think that's amazing, actually. And I really, really love the piano. It is my favourite instrument. And then Spanish guitar is definitely my second.
Love classical guitar and Spanish guitar.
Just gorgeous. My nephew is a very accomplished pianist, and he's a musician as well. And whenever he plays piano, I'm just like in awe.
You know, I had the flute sort of like shoved down my throat. Literally, I was, supposed to play it in the school band and things like that. And I didn't take to it. It was okay, but it didn't enable me to write songs the way I wanted to. And so the piano was just a natural fit. And of course, I did ballet at a young age. So I would come home and play all that classical music by ear, and then quickly widen my palette to everything from pop radio to the Beatles and, rock and roll and really everything that had a good melody and some interesting lyrics. It definitely just all drew me in, and it seemed to be like a way to perceive and chronicle your life through music.
Well, there you go. I bet your parents are very proud of you now, aren't they?
I think they're still a little confused by what I do, but they are proud and they have been supportive in their way. And, they're not musicians, as I said, but they both do love music. So I'm very lucky on that front.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, my parents are still confused. They have no idea what I do, how I do it, why I do it. Do I get paid for doing it?
They know you're the vibrant spirit in the family and always expressive, right?
Oh, my mother.
Curly locks, just
thank you.
Blowing in the wind. And
my mum always says to me, she says, stop asking questions all the time. And I'm like, well, as a child, I asked a lot of questions. And children ask a lot of questions, but I used to ask a lot of questions.
I was very curious, yeah.
And I said, well, you see, now that serves me well, mother.
That's hilarious, because I got a bit of the same thing. I got, stop asking strangers questions and stop being so friendly. It's not appropriate. Yeah. My mother was South, and I guess people were a little bit more guarded then. There's Southern hospitality, but there's also a lot of propriety. And I kind of threw that all out the window the minute I realized I wanted to be an entertainer. So.
There you go. I'm actually feeling this vibe between us, Rachel, right now.
Nice.
That we're kind of, there's a synergy of our lives, crossing paths and everything. Look, I wondered, obviously, as a seasoned musician and a singer, what are the biggest challenges for you personally? Because your challenge may not be someone else's challenge. And what have you found over the years has been your biggest reward?
Beautiful questions. So I'm going to start with the reward because I'm a glass half full kind of gal. I would only dwell there if I could, but reality has its merits. So the most rewarding thing is the ability to connect with all different kinds of people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, orientations, just everybody has a beautiful backstory that's unique and unto them. And I have this beautiful job of not only being able to express myself, but also, if I choose, to listen and maybe even write a song about someone else's experience or their perspective. So it's that breadth, that I love about music and songwriting. And I don't really see, any limitations to it. It seems like, an entire lifetime could be spent just not only minding your own spirit
You're listening
and
to
expressiveness,
Art
but also being a
with
kind of
Amanny Mo.
musical journalist. So that's what I love the most. And then let's see, challenges. I do run a record label. It's called Empress Records. There are a lot of challenges,
Feel free
obviously,
to
with
find
navigating
me
the
on
music
socials
business as
at Amanny
a boss,
Mo. That's
a lady boss, so to speak, and,
AMANYMO on
in
Instagram
a sea
or
of
X,
mostly
formerly
men,
known as
running
Twitter.
companies and running businesses in the music industry. But I really try to lead by example. I have surrounded myself with a wonderful team of primarily women, and it's sort of happenstance, but we all click and we all really respect each other. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to carve a space as an independent musician and label owner and continually be surrounded by like-minded artists and also some not so like-minded artists. And we get that opportunity to connect and hopefully expand each other's horizons, collaborate sometimes. And, if I wanted to just sit in my own apartment and play music, that would be fun. But the fact that I get to do it with such a wider community of diverse individuals is really gratifying.
And also part of the artistry and creative people like to, well, I don't say everyone likes to work with other people, but it's almost like by just holding that beacon for someone else or that space for someone else, we can all learn, and we are learning all the time as human beings, right? So I really feel that's a wonderful thing to do, because it just shows that actually you're really comfortable with who you are, Rachel, and you're not, there's a lot of egos, as we know. I've worked in TV and radio and continue to do so, and there are a lot of egos in our industries as media people and creative people, and we can't let those things get in the way.
A little ego as an artist, it can be a good thing. You have to believe in yourself. You do have to believe you have something meaningful to say and contribute. But yes, in the context of business and just having an opportunity to speak and contribute, yes, too much ego in the workplace is something that I've actually, found a way to write about on this record. My song Whistleblow is kind of about that. It's about that audacity that, abounds sometimes with men in music and entertainment and politics and every type of workplace.
True.
Where they just think you'll necessarily be honored and flattered to receive their affection at every turn, even when it's completely inappropriate. So, there's that. But I have been very fortunate, like I said, to be able to make my own choices of who to have on my team. And, I think the best way to lead is by example. So
absolutely.
I'll continue to do that.
100% agree with you there. And, sort of 20 EPs and albums in, you've got this new album, which is really interesting because it's a reworking, reimagining of many songs, not just your own, but there are some other songs on there, which I think is a really interesting choice. So Talk us through some of them. And actually, I have to say, I Made a Case is just so beautiful with Howard Jones.
Oh, thank
absolutely
you.
Gorgeous.
Well, I'll start with that one then. Yeah, so this particular album, Another Side, is a companion acoustic reimagining of the record The Other Side, which came out a little more than a year ago. So essentially, it's the same songs. I've resequenced the album, but I started completely from scratch and made brand new arrangements with acoustic elements, some of which there were on the prior record, but we just started over completely, myself and my engineer. And if it was electronic and it plugged in, it wasn't allowed. So, it's really very organic, very folk, roots, Americana for people who like that sort of intimacy and where the focus is really on the vocals, the storytelling.
Yeah.
And then anything else in the mix is supporting that, from mandolins to strings and acoustic guitar. And as you said, some classical guitars in there on a couple tunes as well. So yeah, that's the gist of it. And it's very reflective of how my live shows have evolved, what these songs mean to me now.
To me, it's almost like, I've never written a song, but obviously I do a lot of writing for work. But it's almost like you write something and then you go back to it a year later and go, oh, I should have added that bit in, or that thing has happened since, or, almost like you're re-editing yourself, but not in a bad way, in a kind of breathing new life into some good stuff.
I liken it a bit to a script as a theater artist. I did study Shakespeare and things like that in college, and I was an actor for a pretty long period of time. So, you would do a play maybe one season and it would have one director and it would be set outside in a park. And then you would do it with another director a few years later and it would be, something else entirely. Maybe you did it as a one-person tour de force and played all the parts. So that tradition of doing the sort of MTV Unplugged thing started back in the 90s, and I am a child of that era. So, as a producer, it's really rich territory to be able to strip away everything but the voice, the lyric, and the melody, and then see how can I reapproach this where it tells a bit of a different story now, and also where the lyric and the melody are the focus. And, it feels a bit more down to earth, I guess.
You've toured with some fantastic artists recently, quite an eclectic mix, actually. Imelda May and Howard Jones, Lulu as well, which is amazing. What was that like, and what's that like for you as an artist to tour with other artists and bringing almost a new audience to your music as well?
Definitely, yeah. You mentioned Howard Jones and enjoying that duet I did with him, so I'll start with him. He is just the loveliest person, and of course, I idolized him as a child. I loved all his songs. I loved No One Is to Blame was one of my favorites, and I did end up covering it with his blessing. And to learn that someone that you've admired for so long, it walks the walk. He's a humanitarian kind of guy. He's Buddhist, and, he's just so many things that are so interesting and so compelling as a person. And it just makes me respect and enjoy his music all the more. And the same really goes for Imelda May. She's very socially conscious, and her poetry is stunning. And as a spoken word artist and poet myself, I felt a real kinship with her in that realm.
Yeah.
Lulu was probably the most different for me of all the artists I've ever toured with. And let me just say, if I have 10% of her energy at 75 years old, I will be so happy, because she's incredible. She runs around that stage like she's Mick Jagger, and her voice sounds phenomenal. So I don't know why she's doing her farewell tour. She's earned the right to do whatever she wants to do. Maybe she wants to go be in the movies or just hang out with her, her family, whatever it is. We wish her well.
We wish her well indeed. Well, listen, from me, Frida, to you, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
That was the wonderfully warm singer-songwriter Rachael Sage there, whose new album, Another Side, is available now. You can also find her, and probably everything about her, well, almost, on her website, rachelsage.com. Now, Rachael is spelt R-A-C-H-A-E-L, Sage, S-A-G-E.com. You're listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo. Yep, that's me, where we bring you some cosy conversations with some fabulous people from the world of arts and entertainment. You can access all available podcast episodes on all major podcast platforms, or you can head on over to the website Art to Art, that's art.podbean.com. And if you want to search me out on socials, it's just AMANNYMO, all one word, on Instagram or X, formerly known as Twitter. As ever, if you're enjoying the pod, please do like, follow and share the love with your friends. It's time to wrap up proceedings on this pod episode, but don't press stop yet. Hang on a minute. We've got one more item, another cool jam from my nephew Luca, who's just dropped a single called Faded featuring REAM. You can find him at Luca Mo Music on socials. But it is NEPH JAM o'clock. A tune from Luca to signify the end of the pod. A massive thanks goes to my amazing guests, Strictly Confidential actress Georgia Locke, singer-songwriter Rachael Sage, and documentary filmmaker Kym Staton. Thank you to Luca Mo for the Art to Art titles and incidental music. And a huge thanks goes to you for listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo. Until next time, see ya! You're listening to Art with Amanny Mo. This is your podcast that brings you interviews, reviews, arts and entertainment news, all wrapped up in one place.